Welcome to In Context, the Liberty News and War Report for February 13th, 2012. My name is Ken McDermott Rowe.
And I'm Gus Cantivero.
The Republican presidential primary races seem to be getting more and more confused. After losing three important primaries to Rick Santorum, Romney seems to have come back in Maine. Is Santorum for real? Is Romney the inevitable front-runner? And what seems to have happened to Ron Paul?
Yeah, well, we see here we're using New York Times to illustrate Romney's big win in the Maine caucus. And right away, as soon as it was reported, it seems like he is rebounding after losing those three states to Santorum, although their caucuses, some of them are non-binding. Missouri is really just a straw poll.
Right, he wins by 30 points, but will Santorum
but it doesn't
actually
even
get
matter
the delegates?
because
No.
they have to vote again anyway, right?
But it drives coverage and
It does.
expectations.
It definitely drives coverage. It gives the mainstream media a chance to jump on this and rack up another win, and because we love these big stories.
Well, we love the sporting aspect.
The sport of it, yes.
And now Santorum is shown with a lead in the primary in Michigan, which was where Romney's father was governor, George.
Exactly, which would really be a blow to the Romney campaign. But one of the big stories about the Maine caucus is that it's actually not over yet, because they had canceled, I think, 65 of the remaining caucuses that were yet to vote because they were expecting some snow. Now, this is Maine, of course, where they get a lot of snow. And I think in the Ron Paul campaign press release, they said that even the Girl Scouts didn't cancel their event.
So the preliminary results show Romney was 39% and Paul with 36%, but there are a significant number of votes left
with
out
a difference of only 194 votes between them. And there are 65 caucuses left to go, and you figure even if there is only a handful of people at each of those caucuses, and these are the areas like Washington County where Ron Paul is strongest because they're rural and they're lower income areas, instead of, say, Portland, where Romney campaigned heavily and where you imagine in the capital there's going to be some money. So places like that are probably going to go for someone like Romney, where he's able to really just canvass the area with heavy advertising and show up with a campaign bus. But Romney showed that he doesn't really care that much because he left as soon as the results were announced, and he didn't campaign in the state until right before the announcement, and his campaign bus was seen at one of those headquarters where they had canceled the caucus. So that is kind of suspicious. So I think we need to wait and see what's going to happen with this one and not jump to conclusions, because it really seems like the media loves the chance to announce a win and then move on. They just hate something that drags out. They want that big story. They want the big headline. And, you know, we really need to wait and find out, because even though the final votes, all the votes haven't been counted, they are non-binding. So we have to remember this, that the delegates, even though the idea is that it's a straw poll where the people come and they choose who they prefer, the delegates are not bound to vote for one of those candidates like they are in a winner-take-all primary. That's the difference between a caucus and a primary. So all the delegates, or most of the delegates that have been nominated, are actually Ron Paul supporters, or people who lean Ron Paul. So the idea that Romney won and then they jump on the chance to assign the majority of the delegates to Romney is kind of insulting to our intelligence, because this is only half the story.
Ron Paul hasn't won a primary yet. He's running pretty distant, a caucus, and a distant third or maybe fourth in the national polls. And I think it's very unfortunate. Perhaps it's partly due to the poor coverage, because Ron Paul is the only one who's really providing any material for debate in the Republican primary.
It's also due to the amount of dead people voting.
Yeah, it could be there's some funny stuff going on, but Ron Paul has raised the issue of the war.
1,200 dead people voted in South Carolina.
Well, I'm not surprised. But what about the real issues? I mean, he has brought the war to the forefront as an issue, but it doesn't get debated unless he's considered a major candidate. He's made the Federal Reserve an issue, doesn't get debated at all. He's put out a program to cut the deficit by $1 trillion in his first administration. They never talk about specifics. And what I want to see is Ron Paul in the debate driving these issues forward. And I don't think that they're being brought up as long as he does so poorly in the polls. So I think it's a lose-lose situation for the American public.
I think the biggest issue is the foreign policy aspect, right? Because I meet a lot of people who really like what Ron Paul stands for, but they keep on coming back to this, well, he scares me when it comes to foreign policy.
And you would think the scary guys will be these other candidates who are saying we've got to bomb Iran and unleash what could be a wider world war, which we've been talking about a lot in the last few months in the war report. And it's just not on the table in this campaign.
Yeah, and that's what scares me personally, because I don't want war. I don't want to see people get killed needlessly. I don't want to see infrastructure destroyed. I don't want to see children without water or electricity. And we're talking about parts of the world that just don't have the capacity for reconstruction that we do.
And consider what it would do to the American economy if we fight a major war with, say, the Russians, which could happen, and our economy will. It's fragile now. It'll really go down the toilet.
And I think that is a big aspect of it, because you talk to people, they have no idea even what a mutual defense treaty is. And we talk about how Iran has mutual defense treaties with China and Russia. And this person I was talking to just the other day, making very valid, coherent points. However, we differed on the fact that I felt like he was only looking at half of the picture. And he was saying, but, Ahmadinejad and the Ayatollah, he believes are madmen, and that if they get the nuke, they may use it, or they probably will use it. And can we take that chance? And I was saying, well, with the availability of suitcase nukes and their coziness with China and Russia, and would China and Russia, who are obviously not that religious zealot who wants to bring about the end times or bring about the Messiah.
This is realpolitik. They don't want to be surrounded by the U.S.
Exactly. They don't want to be brought into this kind of a catastrophic end of the world scenario. So why would they hitch their wagon?
And if there's one purpose of a campaign, it's to educate the American people on the issues. And all we're getting is these other candidates saying how warlike they are, essentially supporting the expansionary military policy of Bush Jr. and now President Obama.
And beside that, the Iranians are not Al-Qaeda. We have to make that distinction different. They are enemies. They're from different sects. They're not Wahhabists. And that is the biggest misunderstanding in the mainstream representation of the foreign policy problem. So when we talk about Ron Paul's foreign policy, he is not saying that we need to cozy up with terrorists, because even though they may use scary rhetoric, they're not Al-Qaeda. They're not the same people. They don't believe the same things.
It remains to be seen whether Ron Paul and foreign policy are going to get in this debate before the Republican convention. Yeah. I just don't know if it's going to happen or whether we're going to have to be looking at the possibility of an independent
And I do want to make it clear that I am not leaning one side or the other, saying that I favor Iran or I'm apologizing for Iran. I think that a lot of the rhetoric that they use is very unfortunate and very ill-advised. So I want to make that clear, that I don't support what they're saying one side or the other.
But one thing we've consistently made clear in our series In Context is that the United States should be investing in its own infrastructure, in building high-wage jobs here, and not in foreign military adventures. And this is a policy which goes way back in the Republican Party.
Precisely. Now, you want to shift gears and move over to the next story?
Yes, you observed a very interesting story on kidney disease in Central America. Could you tell
our listeners about that? I found this story just yesterday on the AP. Also picked up by MSNBC, and I did another quick search before we started recording the show, and I see that a lot of other news agencies have also picked up the story, so it's clearly gaining a little momentum here. One of the big aspects of the story is that since the year 2000, 24,000 people in Central America have died from kidney disease. Now, this is a rapid increase in cases of kidney disease. And what the story, which is rather lengthy, devotes only 2 sentences to the possibility that these kidney disease cases are caused by the increase of agricultural chemicals and pesticides, and the fact that these workers are using them without adequate protection. So they're exposed to these chemicals on a day-to-day basis, and there is an incredible increase in kidney disease. Wouldn't you think that there's a correlation between the two?
So what do they say is causing the kidney disease?
Well, the article then goes on to dismiss that theory and say that most experts really believe that it's from chronic dehydration. Now, I think that we've been doing this for centuries, working outside in the sun without bottled water. Okay, we haven't had the chance to bring cheap, clear plastic Poland Spring bottles with us until the recent decades. Okay, so why there's a sudden increase in kidney disease when this is the way human culture has developed for centuries?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, this advent of chemical farming is something we pursued early in one of our series, Seeds of Deception, with the author William Engdahl, and you can see hear our audio interview with him on our website, incontextreport.com. And this whole idea of a heavily chemical-intensive agriculture came out of World War II when the Rockefellers wanted to do to agriculture which they'd done to oil, which was to create a giant cartel to control the industry. And they had all these unused nitrates that they were using for bombs in World War II. They said, let's use them for fertilizer. They had all this oil that they couldn't sell to Europe because Europe was flat on its back. Right. So they created agribusiness in the 40s and 50s. And that's led to this, amongst other things, this chemically intensive farming, which is releasing a lot of pollutants to the workers, but we're receiving it too as consumers.
Right, and it seems like that's a pattern with big business. If you have a chemical that you need to get rid of and it's too dangerous to dump, you just make something out of it that people will wear or ingest. So like fluoride, okay? That's a chemical that is from a rock that's a waste product, it's an industrial waste. You got to get rid of it, fluorine. So instead what they do is they turn it into fluoride and they say, yeah, this bleaches stuff. Here, rub it on your teeth.
Right? Is this crazy? And we saw a long period in the West where disease went down not really because of drugs, but because of improved sanitation, particularly clean drinking water. And then in the last half century, we've seen this steady increase in cancer.
Yes. Right?
And one has to logically come to the conclusion there must be environmental factors here.
Yeah, and if you look at the article just excusing away the responsibility of agribusiness and the chemical industry is kind of despicable and very irresponsible, and just another example of the inefficiency and uselessness of the mainstream media, because they will go and excuse away the rising rates of skin cancer and say that, well, we just aren't using enough sunscreen and we're getting too much sun, and those stupid sun worshippers, and getting their vitamin D, how dare they? They should get flu shots instead. You lather on this aluminum-based sunscreen and you get skin cancer. Why is it that there's no skin cancer in the third world where they don't have sunscreen, but yet they're getting hours and hours and hours of unadulterated sun?
Whether you look at the health policy, nutrition, or foreign policy, you're seeing the evidence of corporate control of our government. Every important aspect of our government policy is dictated by large corporations who've got this system of they control and finance the election process. Yeah. They lobby and control our legislators, and they have a tremendous amount of power over our mass media. So at the end, they control us from A to Z. Yeah. And we've got to break out of this box, and that's one of the reasons why we think In Context is important, and the independent media generally, so that you can get the information you need to break free of this corporate control of our government and our society.
That's going to do it for this episode of In Context, Liberty News and War Report. Be sure to find us at our blog at incontextreport.com. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and find us on Facebook. All right, till next time, I'm Gus Candavero.
And Ken McDermott Rowe.
See you next time.